delighted to have this opportunity to hear from Erin about the ESIP summer meeting. My name is Sarah Stone, and I'm the Executive Director for the University of Washington eScience Institute. For those of you who aren't familiar with eScience, we help researchers use data science tools and techniques across all different disciplines, and we offer a suite of programs, both kind of internal to UW and much more broadly. And be happy to, if there's interest in understanding more about that, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Like many of you, I'm sure probably maybe most of you who are attracted to coming to this session today, at the onset of the pandemic, we found ourselves at eScience looking at a whole series of summer events that we usually do, from sort of shorter hack weeks to a 10-week data science for social good program. All of these programs are we think of them, or had thought of them, as sort of inherently in-person events that really required that type of interpersonal interaction, very close team activities. And so we were quickly thinking about, well, how do we transform? We didn't want to cancel these events, so how do we transform them to be successful in the remote world, which we didn't feel like we necessarily knew that much about, even as a data science institute. And so we were really fortunate to bring on Charlie Haley, who actually also then worked with Erin on the ESIP summer meeting. And so I'll turn things over to her, because I think Charlie, in her role as an expert facilitator and in this role of helping many of programs, these sort of in-person programs, shift into the virtual sphere, she has some really great framing and is learning a lot about the best practices of how we do this. So I'll turn it over to Charlie, and then Charlie will introduce us to Erin.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my expertise is kind of in what has been in face-to-face interactions, but really, like, how do we boost participant engagement no matter what we're doing, right? Like, how do we boost it and take it beyond what we even imagined? I've been working a lot with Anthony on that, and Anthony introduced me to eScience, where I actually have been having the summer of my life, just having an amazing time working with everyone and all the different strategies that they've been doing to approach their hack weeks. But back in, through a separate line, Erin found me through my business partner, and she was scouring the world, the internet, on what are the best platforms and tools to use for bringing her community together for the summer meeting, and also making sure that the participants were engaged, not just like a webinar series, right? And so shortly after meeting Erin, I became a huge fan of hers, because I got to see that she was truly committed to creating the sensation of all the participants, all of her community, her peeps that she's taking care of, right? To creating the sensation of being at an in-person meeting while meeting virtually. And that level, it wasn't that she just wanted that. She was committed to doing it, doing whatever it took to create that, from, the level of support that she gave all the 512 people that registered for this event up front, doing a lot of hand-holding, training them on, okay, we're going to be using a new platform, making sure that they're comfortable, they don't get lost, that she's reducing the barrier for them to fully participate in that. And then hiring my business partner, Fisher Qua, and myself to help train the session host on how do we design each session where we're engaging the participants. How do we design the plenary sessions where 512 people or 150 people are all interacting, creating things together? And she did an amazing job at pushing the envelope on all of these things, where there was no one that I knew of that became before her. She was definitely a pioneer, a bushwhacker. And just to give you one little taste, I've never been part of an organizing team before, where the platform developer was part of the organizing team. And in one of my first meetings with Lucas, the developer of Kiko Chat, he said, Erin is showing me things about my platform and capabilities that I didn't even know it could do. So that just gives you a little bit of taste that Erin was pushing the boundaries on all different directions. And with that, I don't want to embarrass Erin anymore. I think you get clearly that I'm a huge fan. And I'll hand it over to you now, Erin.
Well, thank you so much, Charlie, for that really kind introduction. And thank you to Sarah and the eScience Institute for having me. And it's fun to see some familiar faces in the participant list. And yeah, I'm excited to share what we did at ESIP for the summer meeting, but also I hope that this is a conversation, and I'm really, I'm super curious about how we continue to evolve this and learn how to do this. So I am sharing my screen, and I think hopefully you all can see that. It looks good. So I titled this talk The Connection Experiment because, like Charlie said, the piece that I felt like was missing from the virtual or the remote conferencing experience, especially early in COVID, as we were transitioning, was that we could be in a room with 800 remote participants and I would leave and I still wouldn't have met anybody. And so when I started to think about how we shift, I really wanted the connection piece of this to come through. And so this talk really highlights a couple of different ways that I tried to build connections before, during, and after the meeting. And also I just want to acknowledge that this work wasn't just mine, it was done by a huge team and also by my core staff. So we have, we'll get to my staff and the team in just a minute, but this was a huge team effort. So backing up just a little bit, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Erin Robinson. I'm the outgoing executive director of the Earth Science Information Partners. And ESIP is an organization that's about just over 20 years old and really has the mission to be a leader in promoting the collection, stewardship, and use and reuse of earth science data. So we bring together people across multiple domains, across agencies. We're funded by NASA, NOAA, and USGS, and across sectors, all around common data stewardship challenges. So it's slightly different from the kind of data science mission that you all have, and really it's the management and curation of the data that we care about sort of most. And so this gives you a sense of our partners in eSciences did just join recently. So we have a lot of repositories. We have many research agencies and then application developers like Esri, as well as we also are figuring out ways as an organization to partner with other networked kind of organizations and associations. So that's where you see EarthCube and the Open Geospatial Consortium. But really all of these people are coming together to try to manage and share their data and further interoperability. And so what ESIP has done over the last 20 years is really to provide this connective layer at the kind of the humanware and at the in-person level. So we've been meeting together since 1998, twice a year. So it's like 40 meetings that we've had in this consistent cadence of every 6 months we were coming together, once always in DC and once around the country. But there was this frequency of meetings and this community that was being built because there was this willingness to come together and this history. So I think that one of the things that I was able to leverage in building this remote meeting for ESIP was the fact that there was some portion of the community that had been part of the ESIP meetings in the past and was bringing that to the table. So what we don't do, we don't provide cyber infrastructure, we don't compete with our members, we don't develop standards, we are not a data repository. We're really at this human level of bringing people together, letting them learn from each other, and then they go back to their home institutions and they actually apply what they've learned. And we do that in 3 ways. And I've talked a little bit about the in-person meetings already, and that's my focus today. But we also have most of our work is actually done in the virtual space or the remote space with collaboration areas around topics that emerge from our community. And then the ESIP lab, which funds some prototyping, experimentation, and skill development for piloting ideas that are coming out of these kind of collaborative conversations. And so really in that, what does that kind of human layer and humanware layer look like? And it looks like, sometimes I call it the jungle gym. We are a backbone organization, if you're familiar with collective impact. And we provide our members a lot of different tools and services. And then I say what they do on top of it is really up to them. So ESIP is a supportive organization that's really enabling and lowering the barrier to collaboration. So we were well situated when COVID hit, that our team is remote. We were remote first, and that we have this kind of long history of also working remotely between our 2 annual meetings. And this is the team that I mentioned. So I'm really excited to welcome Susan Shingledecker as our new incoming executive director, and then Annie Burgess is the lab director, and Megan Carter is our community director, and they'll both be continuing on after I leave. So this gets to the meetings. So we've never wanted ESIP meetings to be traditional and a kind of a passive, I think our sort of counterpoint is AGU fall meetings, the American Geophysical Union, where people come and just present their work, and there's a little bit of time for conversation, but it's really more of a passive experience to begin with. And what we have cultivated is a really kind of a community created and cultivated meeting where we design the plenaries, but in pretty strong partnership with our community, they create all of the breakouts. So probably 80 to 90% of the content is created by the community for the community. And then the thing that they are unwilling to compromise on is the networking time and these kind of unconference times where they can just come together and work. And when we've tried to modify on that, we have found that they're not, that they really value this time with each other, and they're looking for more of it. So in our in-person surveys, we always see like, we wish the breaks were longer. And I think we're giving you half an hour at the coffee break and an hour and a half at lunch. We can't make these things much longer, but they've in the in-person space have been kind of pushing both the length of the meeting and kind of the structure of the meeting as we've been evolving. And this is very blurry, I'm sorry, but this is just a little bit of why people are coming to ESIP meetings. And so just to kind of hit home on the fact that like when we pivoted, I really needed to think about how we were getting the networking, the idea exchange, and helping people find collaborators. And I think this is an interesting statistic that we have, that 92% of people have formed collaborators with other meeting attendees. So that's really, we're giving them this space to find collaborators, to find potential, proposal writing partners. And then we also give them these spaces where they can test those partnerships out before they go big. And I won't dwell here. I think you're getting the message that, people have been very kind of emphatic about ESIP meetings and what they wanted out of those meetings. And it's been my job to help support them in that space. So in March, we realized that we were going to have a very different meeting, and we started to think about a contingency plan. And then we started canceling all of the other meetings that we were supporting. And in April, our board met and they decided not to just move one of our ESIP meetings to the virtual space, but they decided to move both. So we moved our July meeting, which obviously we had to, but they went ahead in April and made the decision for the stability of the community that we were going to also move our January 2021 meeting. This allowed us, I think, a lot of time. And, I worried that maybe we were making the wrong decision. I think all of us have had probably these thoughts about like, are we being too conservative or not conservative enough? And it seems like, January would still be kind of a tenuous time to have a meeting. So I'm happy for the community that they knew this going into the year, that we would have these 2 virtual meetings. And so a lot of what we did in May and June was beginning to rework our budget. We support a lot of travel in the ESIP staff budget or the ESIP operational budget. And so we were able to take the money that we would have spent on travel and start investing it into the community in these ways that I think were pretty profound and really, to me, seem more valuable than providing travel funding moving forward. So I think those are some of the things that I, perhaps will persist after. And we also began to support some of the other meetings like the EarthCube annual meeting that was going into the remote space. So since we knew that we were going to be remote for the next 2 meetings, the board also decided to invest in evaluation. And so these were the 3 guiding questions around our evaluation. And I will touch on our evaluation results as I move through this. And so the key kind of data sets that we were collecting, just thinking about the data first, we had done an attendance, so our evaluator attended 18 sessions and plenaries to get a feel for the meetings. We used Sketch, which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth in a minute, and the Sketch has a built-in smiley feedback form. So we really pushed on attendees to use that feedback form for participation data. We ran 2 surveys, a midpoint survey to understand satisfaction, and then a final survey. And then we also had 3 focus groups that met with the evaluator for an informal conversation. And then we identified several people that were various, sort of various kinds of stakeholders for individual interviews. So we had a pretty comprehensive look at this meeting of how people were feeling about the meeting and their input. So starting with the tech and design, one of the things that Charlie mentioned was really, I think when I felt like I had hope for this meeting being an interactive meeting was when I ran across liberating structures. And Charlie, I just wonder if you can say just a little bit about liberating structures for those that aren't familiar with them.
Liberating structures are, it's a set of 33 to, and it's growing to 50 plus structures. So it's a way of structuring interactions between participants so that you're boosting really engagement, depth, sense making, allowing all participants to tap into their wisdom, knowledge, experience that's already there, but doesn't get tapped really in the traditional ways that we interact with each other through presentation, open discussion, those type of structures. So it shakes things up quite a bit.
And so what I really liked about this was it was ways that we moved from just watching. And I think one of the things I wished maybe I could have done in this talk, but we haven't really built in, is actually using liberating structures so that you could get a sense for what these are. But they're some of them are common facilitation techniques that you would have seen in person, but this community is moving them also into the virtual space. So we were using liberating structures and then combining them with some of the technology. So the first decision that we made was to take what should have been a 4 full day meeting, and we moved it into 2 weeks. And so we had Tuesdays and Thursdays, we had plenaries in the morning. We have a strong Australian contingent. So both weeks on Wednesday, we had a Wednesday afternoon plenary. And then you can see that the rest of this was spent in breakouts. We gave people a longer breakout around 1 o'clock Eastern, and then we gave them a half-hour break between the 2 breakout sessions to try to kind of allow people to find ways to work within their real, and regular lives. And then on Fridays, we would have these. The first one was called First Friday, which was where we had our poster session and began to brainstorm for a competition that we have called Funding Friday. And then the second week looked very similar. And the second Friday was really spent in this pitch competition where there were 9 teams that shared ideas that they had developed over the 2-week period. And then we voted on those ideas, and 3, and I guess 6 were funded at either the $3,000 level, $3,000 level, or $5,000 level. So a lot of working sessions. I think one of the things that we noticed about this, the 2-week period for the staff was really hard. It was exhausting. We definitely, for the winter meeting will only be 1 week. And I'm not sure if the summer is to go virtual again, if they would do 2 weeks again, but this was pretty exhausting. And then the other thing was this day 2 and day 7, where we had 3 breakout sessions and then we had a plenary in the evening, also felt too long. So I think that kind of the optimal length of meeting per day seemed like, 6 hours was about what people could take with this 1.5-hour break built in. So to cover the tools that we used, we tried to keep some of the things that we had been using the same. So we used Sketch, Figshare. We are a Google Suites shop, so we always had Google Docs. So those were things that we kept the same, as well as Cvent for registration. And then what we changed, we added Zoom because of its instance breakout capability. And we used Kiko Chat for our venue, and I'll dive into that just a little bit more. So Kiko Chat, you can basically think of it like the hotel, and it has really 3 basic pieces. It has events, it has a directory of people, and then it has this always on Zoom instance where people can hang out. And it gives people the autonomy to make a decision about where they're going in the venue. So this is just a quick screenshot of what, when we were in session, what our plenary and breakout space looks like. And the nice thing that I really love about Kiko Chat is it's bringing together all of the docs that you need here. So you could have different tabs for things you wanted people to be aware of, and this green button of joining the video for the plenary. And if you moved down into these other rooms in this event, you could, the Zoom instance changes and the docs change. And we have a sample Kiko Chat space set up for you guys to look at. But that is how that works. So that's, I think, part of the magic for me was just bringing those things together so that I was no longer searching. This is just a quick view of what the Hangout. So this was our way to replicate the kind of the hallway conversation. What we found was people didn't go here very often. So we have data on where in Kiko Chat people were most. They were mostly in that plenary and breakout space, and they didn't seem to come up to navigate to the Hangouts or kind of any of the other things that were going on. So we are rethinking how we provide those hallway conversations. And I guess I would also add to this, is it really, it seems like people don't really want one more Zoom. And so are there other ways for us to engage people socially within the confines of the regular meeting? And we had a set of those rooms, and we had added these pictures. So these pictures actually were from our Tacoma. They're in the Tacoma Convention Center. So they were ways to make it sort of feel like our space. And then I think one of the nice things about Kiko Chat, and one of the things that we found as a silver lining, was just the ability to literally get a sense of who was in the room. And so this, I joked, was our first group photo, and people over the course of the 2 weeks filled out more of their pictures. And we encouraged that profile development because it then allowed us to see where people were spatially. Kiko Chat has a built-in network map that I don't love, but it's an interesting way to start to see these connections between the community that we weren't getting in an in-person meeting. And then it also, they have part of the profile is needs and offers. And I think of this as the things that you might share when you were standing in line getting coffee, but we now have a record of 500 and I guess 478 people who actually came into Kiko Chat and what they were looking for. So I think there's a wealth of data here that we could mine to understand more about our community than we could have from an in-person meeting. So just a little from the evaluation on the technology. Zoom was the easiest to use. Kiko Chat had a learning curve, but still 72% of people still said they agreed or they totally agreed that it was easy to use. So I think we're, for this meeting, going to keep, for the winter meeting, we're going to keep our platform the same. We struggled with federal use of Zoom, and I can come back and talk more about that if people are interested. So the pre-meeting connections that we were building, started with a lot of training. I think this was a surprise to me as we were building out the meeting space, was the amount of anxiety that the community had about leading sessions in the virtual space, and the amount of training that I then developed to help make them more comfortable, or try to reduce some of that anxiety. So we ran a lot of training. So we did a technical training to get them familiar with KikoChat and using Zoom. In addition to the training that we led for the session conveners, we also had a staff person in every breakout. So I saw way more content than I've seen in recent past at ESIP meetings, which was really wonderful for me. And then we also have community fellows, which are grad students and recent postdocs, who were also supportive of the session leaders. And we were realizing how many roles there are in monitoring the chat and helping divide people into breakout rooms, and just kind of ensure that there's a smooth flow. As Charlie mentioned, we also led a couple of session convener facilitation workshops, and this was really to inspire session leaders to not give this one-way content stream with no interactions. And one of the things that we saw in the evaluation, and I'll get to the data in a minute, is just how much people really liked the session content, and they liked that interactive portion of the content. And then the third thing that I did, which was truly I think an experiment, was we had, from the registration, we knew if this was the person's first meeting, or if it wasn't their first meeting, what meeting it was. We knew areas of interest, we knew organizations, and had some, we didn't really have like a great career stage metric, but we did know if people had registered as a student. And so I did some random, some not random manipulation of the registration list, and created these groups of 6 to 8 people. And I sent, I think, 56 emails to each of these small groups. And I didn't find a tool for doing that easily, so that they would then be able to reply to each other. But this was the attempt at the random people that you might sit down with. And so I saw in some of these small group intros, they kept me on the list. And so I did see that lots of them started conversations. They went to the hangouts in the coffee breaks. And it did seem like there had been some serendipitous connections made here. And so, we didn't evaluate people or ask people how this went for them in the evaluation, but it was an interesting kind of last minute idea to add to this event. So during the meeting, just to give you a sense of who was there, Charlie mentioned we had 512 attendees. We had 168 speakers. We had a much larger international attendance than we normally have, although the time zones were not really conducive to either Europe or to Australia. And then we had 196 first-time attendees. And the one thing I'll say about attendance in general, we were blown away at the number. And we actually made the choice to close registration at about 500 because we weren't sure of the level of service we would be able to offer people if we kept growing. Would there be enough Zoom seats? Would there be enough, what would we do about help and support? And we knew that there was going to be a lot of hand-holding of attendees, just like we had done with the session leaders. So I also, in addition to session leader tech training, I ran a lot of KikoChat onboarding for people the week before the meeting, just trying to get as many people familiar with the space as possible so that we wouldn't lose people. So this just gives you an idea of the shape of participation. It fell off from the first day, the first plenary. So the greens are the plenaries, and then the blues are the breakouts. And so, the first day was our highest attended plenary, and then things tapered off. Our evaluator said he wondered if we had an anchor speaker on Thursdays of those 2 weeks, if we would have seen more attendance. I kind of think we did have anchors in those Thursday spaces. And so I'm not sure if there's anything you could do to boost attendance, but I would be curious if you all have thoughts there on this kind of trend. we had a midpoint feedback, and we had where people were attending about 2 sessions a day, where they were saying that they had made connections. So we knew that we were doing something right. They indicated at the midpoint that they really liked the breakouts and the Zoom breakouts, or the end Zoom instance, small groups, and they really liked the facilitated sessions that we were doing with Charlie during the plenary. The session content was rated pretty well, and I think everybody felt like it was going better than they expected, and we were learning a lot. So what could have been better, people were the Zoom limitations for the federal employees, and particularly for NOAA, was tough. So we chose to use Zoom, and then we were live streaming Zoom to YouTube so that the feds could participate. And that was just kind of, it affected a very small number of people out of the 512, but it was tough. There was a lot of confusion about where the KikoChat link was in Sketch and why we were using Sketch and KikoChat. And so we worked a lot on where that KikoChat link was on the Sketch page. People missed bumping into each other in the social. And then more time for discussion and Q&A is kind of always something. And then I think maybe the second 2 are the last 2, the way to opt out of breakouts. So this was something that we added in the second week. We said, if you don't want to be automatically or put into a Zoom breakout, just put an X, rename yourself with an X at the beginning of your name in any session, and we'll know to just leave you out of the breakouts. So some people didn't like being forced into a breakout, or they weren't in a place where they could talk. And so that seemed to work pretty well. And then, I think that there's, and I don't have a good answer for the emails, that there were too many emails from us. I think we became aware of, like, KikoChat as a platform was sending emails, Sketch was sending emails, we were sending emails. So people were getting a lot of notifications around the meeting. We scaled back on our communication to try to be kind of cognizant of this, and in week 2, and I wonder if we saw kind of such a significant drop off from week 1 to week 2 because we weren't reminding people as much, but that's a balance. So we're still learning. So overall, we had a really high approval rating on the conference design. People felt like the information was clear. They liked the speakers and the hours. The things that they found tiresome about the design was being online was tiresome, which I think we all understand. And the 2-week length of meeting was also seen as kind of a negative on the design. For the sessions, they really liked the sessions. They liked the facilitated portions of the sessions. This was new to this meeting. So I think another thing that COVID gave us was the ability to rethink how we have ESIP sessions. After 20 years of having meetings in pretty much the same format, this was a nice opportunity to challenge the community to rethink how they have sessions. So I was happy that people were so positive about the sessions. And then from the operational side of things, what we saw was that really there was a lot of accessibility improvements in how we were running this meeting. It was easier to hear and see speakers. It was easier to get the materials. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was this contributing comments, that people who wouldn't normally go to the mic or speak up in a live session in real life felt like using the comments was a way that they could safely share and interact. So I was really pretty pleased with how everything has come out. Again, KikoChat is where people were probably the most complainy in how it worked, but even that was not, it's not super significant. And then this just shows the midpoint to final shifts. So what you want to see is trends that are going up to the right. So we saw that with the staff support, the plenaries, the welcoming, and then coming down with Zoom breakouts and interactions. I think that people, maybe the shine had worn off on Zoom breakouts and interactions, that they were just less obvious or less present. I don't think that they were actually less valued overall, but this just gives some comparison. And then lastly, the post-meeting connections. So ESIP has used Sketch for our pre-meeting agenda planning and content. We used it during the meeting to provide links to KikoChat and to get people into the sessions. And then once the sessions are over, the recordings and the presentations are posted here. And then we also encourage each session to create this takeaways, which allows other people who weren't able to attend to just quickly get a summary of what happened in that session. So that's one way that we're doing that asynchronous connections and allowing the material to be freely and openly accessible after the meeting. The other way that we do that is through a meetings highlights webinar, where a lot of different session leads give quick 1-minute presentations on their session, primarily on those takeaways. And it's another way to get a quick synopsis of what happened at the meeting. And so that recording is available too after the fact. So I think just to wrap it up and to stop here, I know I'm over time. You know, I think that being able to make that decision to go remote sooner than later allowed us to provide the community with some certainty, like I mentioned. And it also, that sooner than later also allowed us to build. And one of the things sort of in the throes of right before the meeting, I realized how much I had taken for granted the hotel infrastructure that we had leveraged, you know, that it grows our staff with the hotel staff. We don't have to worry about security because the hotel has security. You know, if we need chairs or poster boards or whatever, that's all available to us and we have this support. And when we moved to the remote space, we were building all of that. We were building the poster space. We were building the security. We were handling all of it. And we were still our small team of 4 people. I think that being able to use some of our tools that existed for in-person meetings helped us. And, you know, I really think that the investment in the community, taking that travel support to invest in the facilitation and the tools made for a better meeting. So one of the things our evaluator said to us recently was that he felt like some of the benefits of the virtual outweigh the potential of going back to business as usual when we can travel. And I think that's a really interesting idea. But we certainly, you know, we missed our in-person connection too. So, you know, I'm kind of looking forward to the balance and to seeing what we carry back. So with that, I'll stop there. I knew I had a lot of material to cover and lots of things I wanted to share with you. And this is, you're really hearing this kind of in real time as I start to digest it post meeting. So I will escape here, stop sharing.
So I'm wondering if it would be, so there's going to be time for us to ask her questions. And then also Erin wanted to give you an experience of KikoChat. So taking us over to KikoChat and then maybe showing you what is an interaction? What would that look like with 150 or so people? So what order do you think should we take questions about your presentation now and go to KikoChat, or do that all on KikoChat, do you think?
Are there any, maybe just any clarifying questions or quick questions I saw? Yeah,
I have a question,
Charles.
if I may. Charles, yeah, so this is great, by the way. Thank you so much. It's like something we all have to deal with. I'm wondering, there's a lot of different tools you use to assemble, to put together for a really big conference. And I'm wondering, like I'm doing a little 3-hour thing remotely at a conference, a workshop. I'm wondering at what scale of, you know, event do you start adding these tools? Because if you add them too early to a small event, it just clutters stuff up. But at what point do they start adding value, like this KikoChat or anything beyond basic Zoom? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction to that is when it's multi-day and, you know, places where, so ESIP was a multi-day event with many people coming. And so I think that is one, maybe one sort of one indicator that you might want to use KikoChat. I mean, I know that KikoChat has been used for one-day events or shorter events, and I think we've thought about using it for our in-between meeting collaboration areas, but only using just the event function of KikoChat, which just gives you this is the Zoom button, and these are all the associated documents so that people can be there together. But yeah, I totally appreciate the tool proliferation and wanting to keep it simple. And we did get that. I didn't really hit on it much, but we did get that feedback that even Sketch, KikoChat, and Zoom was sort of too many tools. And is there a way that we could have combined Sketch and KikoChat into a single thing, so that they didn't have to have both?
Great. Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, good question. But maybe that does lead in nicely to just showing you around KikoChat a little bit, and what it looked like. So we used it, I'll share my screen. So we had made the decision that we were going to charge registration. And when we made that decision, then we needed to have a way to gate some of the content. And so we created in KikoChat, they have their largest organizing element is called a circle. And so the ESIP summer meeting was a circle. And like I mentioned, it then gave us events, the ability to have this practitioner data professional directory, so the meeting attendees could all find each other that way. But what I was just sort of explaining to Charles without showing him was that they have these events are really where we spent most of the time. And so the nice thing is if you're in KikoChat and you're on this Zoom, then you start to show up as a little avatar. So we could see, who was in what room. And that was another kind of interesting thing. And you can click on these little pictures and it gives you the quick view of their profile. So you can see Anthony's down here in one of the other rooms. So this was really where we spent most of our time, and it had a bit of an ephemeral presence, because just like in a hotel room, we turned the content over every day. So even though we could have given every ESIP breakout session its own room in this space and had 60 rooms, we didn't want to potentially take away from the things that were scheduled live that day. So we would shift and would update the rooms every day. So that's a little bit about the events. And then we created events for the sort of the three main components of our meeting. And so that's the poster session, which we call the research showcase, and our Funding Friday space. And what was, I think, unique to this that maybe I didn't kind of realize how powerful it would be until we were in it, was the ability to give all poster presenters their own Zoom. So with each of these rooms, it comes with, and this is turned off right now, but each of them came with their own Zoom. And so at any time during the meeting, a presenter could make a connection, could see someone, or want to share their poster, and they could say, hey, come check out my poster and here's the link. And they could have a conversation, and they didn't have to ask us for permission. And so it gave our attendees a lot of agency and autonomy to be making these connections and, using Zoom like crazy. But I think that was an interesting thing. And then in our real-time kind of event, when we were all together in the research showcase, we used this, you can see here, this yellow timer box, and you can set the timer. And we had people move through posters every 5 minutes. And I'm terrible at poster sessions in real life. I tend to get into a conversation at one poster, and I don't make it through very many. And so having this ding, that everybody heard, and the ability to then move to the next poster was a cool thing to have a cue to end the conversation and go to the next one. So that's something that we really liked. And we also liked how the content. So this is an example of embedding a YouTube presentation. If you're familiar with iPosters from AGU, and I think other groups use these. Let's see if I can find one that's an iPoster. iPoster
Erin,
embedded. Yep.
Clarify that the posters I didn't get. Are these pre-recorded 5-minute spiels, or was it that each person had 5 minutes, or how? Clarify that.
Good question. Yep. So we had, I guess we had about 60 minutes or so in the poster session, and we had all poster presenters. So just like you can see my little icon here. So all the poster presenters went to their room and started their Zoom. And then the rest of the attendees would pick a poster to start with, and the presenter would be there live for a 5-minute presentation. And then we would ring the timer, and everybody, the poster presenters would stay put, and everybody else would rotate through.
And was it a one-to-one thing, or was it possible for multiple people to like beam into a person giving their Zoom presentation halfway through? So you're giving your 5-minute spiel, and someone pops in 2 minutes, and they stay for 7 minutes. Was it?
Yep, it was absolutely possible to do that. And we saw a lot of that. You know, like I joined late, and then I wanted to hear the beginning of the spiel again, so I would stay for the next round, or I was having a good conversation, and so I would stay for the next 5-minute round. It wasn't required to move, and yeah, you could come in and out, and attendees could come in and out as they wanted.
And the poster people would basically give their spiel 12 times, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Yes, just to clarify here. So the beauty of Kiko Chat is that participants can move themselves in and out. They are not reliant on the Zoom host to put them in a room. They can, it mimics being at a real person event, but just like a poster session, you could wander around, and that's what Kiko Chat gave the participants the ability to do, wander around at their choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so Erin, within the poster, I'm really interested in this poster session. That was my big question, so I'm glad you hit that. So there was a lot of interaction. Did people raise their hands, or did they just interrupt, or how did that conversation unfold with the multiple participants?
Yeah, so they tended to be really pretty small conversations. So it was like 2 to 3 people with the poster presenter. So it was easier to navigate, and we didn't have, you know, the kind of the interruption or hand raising wasn't so necessary. I think one of the things, I'll go back there, that we started to do, so we ran this once the first Friday, and it was so successful. And we liked it so much that we decided to try to fit it in again. But we had, I think, how many total? 37 posters. And the group that showed up to the research showcase wasn't huge. It was maybe 50 or 60 people. And so we were seeing that, like, we should say, you know, go to an even number poster, go to an odd number poster, and the poster presenters wanted to be able to see more content. So I think if I did it again, I would have, you know, half of the poster presenters at their posters, so that there would be a few more people in each conversation, and then flip them to the second half, or somehow break them into chunks.
Great, thank you.
But they were really nice conversations. You know, I think it was nice to have the time and the kind of I don't know, there's just something about, like, also not having all of the noise of a normal poster session around, that they weren't so distracted. So.
And one more question about posters.
Sure.
How do the little conversations, which are spontaneous and take as long as they take, mesh with the constant cadence of every 5 minutes giving a spiel?
You know, we just weren't super strict. If, you know, if people, it was up to the presenter if they wanted to stick to that cadence. And so I think that was kind of our standard way of operating too, of just, you know, we provided guidance on how we thought this might work, and then they implemented or didn't. So if they were having a good conversation, they didn't, you know, they weren't forced to stop at all. And so, yeah, it was just, we gave suggestions, and
Great.
sort of like the rest of the backbone that we provide. One other thing I just want to note here that was kind of interesting. So we had the content. So this was what the presenter contributed to the poster session, and then we had each poster had a Google Doc, which had that was created by the staff, and it had their abstract and title, times that they were going to be at their poster, and then it also had a place for asynchronous conversation or asynchronous comments, connections, and I think this could be even more curated or more sort of facilitated, and in the kind of questions or invitations that you might give the participants who are rotating through the poster. So Charlie had thought of like, what's something that's totally outside of your wheelhouse and go there, or just thinking about ways to invite people to see things that they might not see otherwise. So if we go back to the event that I created, so I can put this in the chat too. Can participate now. So we had this main room. This was where we were putting announcements and kinds of things that we would have told people in the plenary session. So Charlie added here our agenda for today. And then we also had a help desk. So this help desk had a quick start tutorial about how to use KikoChat. It also had this joined video for the help desk. And so we were able to have the same help desk Zoom across those different events that we had in our space. And then we could also point people to the code of conduct and our full meeting schedule. And then you also see this live chat. So this was another place where people ask for help, and it was basically like a loud system, a PA system, because this chat chatted across the entire circle. So if you were lost and looking for something, you could post help here, and an ESIP staff person would help you figure out where you were going. And then Charlie has added here one of the activities that we did in the plenary. So every day during our plenary session, we would have some structured content, a couple of presentations, and then we would have an activity designed to mix and network the participants. And Stephanie, just quickly, the speakers weren't required. ESIP has a very funny, I guess, relationship with requirements. It was highly encouraged, and there was a lot more structure, and I can come back to that after we talk about this this plenary engagement, but that's a good question. So Charlie, do you want to talk a little bit about the walkabout?
Can you, yeah, maybe it would be helpful to go to the, click on the agenda notes for in the main room so that people can see that.
Yes.
So what Erin is showing you is, the sensation, if you were walking into the KikoChat space yourself, where you're in the main room, and then off to the left, you can see the additional breakout rooms. And so for this particular, I think it was a 45-minute activity at the end of one of the plenaries where ESIP had a new set of 5 strategic themes that they were developing and wanted to get input on from the entire community there. So there were about 150 some participants in this session, and we had one breakout room for each of the 5 strategic themes. And the directions were to that there would be 3 rounds, and each round was, I don't know, like 13-minute rounds, something like that. And the first one would be like, in the first round, let me get up here myself and scroll. I'm in the Kiko chat room as we're speaking. So in the first round, go to the strategic theme, go to the room where it's like, it needs a lot more work in order for it to be a compelling theme for you personally. And go to that room, and when you're in the room, there would be an ESIP staff that would put you in pairs, where you would meet someone and talk about, like, what is it that, what needs to be changed about this theme for it to be compelling for you? And then, so they would chat like 5 or 6 minutes with a partner, and then they would come back and they would type in suggestions for the ESIP board and staff for how things could be more compelling about that theme. At the end of 12 or 15 minutes, they were asked to then leave that room and go to the next room, which was go to the room that is already very compelling to you. You might already be doing work in this area, and chat about and type in what's it going to take to make this a reality? What are your suggestions? What are the steps? What are we going to have to do as a community to make this particular theme a reality? And then after about 15 minutes, there was a third round, which was go to the theme that you think is really ambitious. It's worthy. We definitely should pursue it, but it's a big hurdle, right? It's going to take a lot of work to do it. And so go to that room and chat about, like, what are the obstacles we're going to need to address? What are the first steps we should take? And so by the end of the 30 or 45 minutes that we were doing this, each room then had a series of comments and feedback for the staff and the board that was all about how to make these strategic themes more appealing. And Erin right now is taking one of the themes and showing you that the green are all the comments in 3 rounds that people had a chance. And Anthony is here. Anthony was a participant in this particular activity. So Anthony, I'm wondering if you'd say a few remarks about what was this experience like for you to move in and out of the rooms with 150 some people and contribute to these documents?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. I was, first of all, really surprised at how smoothly that moving around went. You know, we were, especially as we got further into the experience, not only getting into that Kiko chat space, but then dropping in within that Zoom room into another breakout with in pairs. But that all went surprisingly well, and it allowed us to go a little bit deeper in our you know, thinking more deeply about each of these themes, and then to come back out and share with the broader group was really effective. What I noticed when I went into a particular room is having that Google document there already populated with the invitations, with our directions, and then with all of the text from previous participants who had already, you know, as we got further into the exercise, allowed us to kind of build off of each other's ideas, and then we could really hit the ground running. There was very little time spent trying to figure out what we needed to do next. So part of this, I think, is attributed to just the quality of the invitations and the clarity that with which everything was set up. Again, just really allowed us to quickly go deeply in this work and then get new ideas down on the page. The other thing I noticed is that having that, and Erin alluded to this when she was speaking earlier, is that, you know, some people maybe didn't quite feel comfortable speaking out into the group, but having that option to type directly into the document let some ideas come out that, you know, maybe wouldn't have otherwise if we were purely in person or speaking into a group. And so what I noticed a few times is people would write something and then someone would +1 it or maybe pick up on that thread, and it sometimes opened the door to these topics that, you know, might not have surfaced in other circumstances. And I'll just say to wrap up that in comparing this to what I've seen, you know, if I was trying to do this type of activity in person, it might have been more difficult, which is a bit surprising to say. I think some of the factors there are that it was really time bounded. We knew we only had a set amount of time to get through this. And so people got to work quickly and knew that the clock was ticking, and we really were able to do a lot in a short amount of time. And then having everything in one platform, in one place, you know, if you're at an in-person meeting and you're put into groups and you're trying to figure out, well, where should we gather together? Who's going to take notes? Whose computer will it be on? Maybe we're not quite clear on what we're supposed to be doing. And suddenly, you know, you don't get quite as much done as we did in this experience. So it was pretty intensive. I felt like at the end of it that I had done a lot of thinking, and you know, it was a different experience than sort of watching some talks or being at a conventional workshop. And then you know, coming back to this today, just really struck by just how much was accomplished by this group in that amount of time. And it just seems like some really valuable information was brought to the surface. So that's what I have to share, Charlie. Thanks.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is remarkable coming back to it again. You know, it's just how much good stuff got added. And Anthony, it's really an interesting point of that in some ways the remote, moving this into a remote space allowed this to be easier than it would have been in person, because you're right, like all of the things you just said, getting to the table.
Yeah.
I ask one quick question. And first of all, I noticed Stephanie Shadbolt had a question on the comments that I'd love to hear an answer. It's interesting. But to this point of comments, the comment typing allows a whole voice to people who normally don't have a voice in these contexts, because some people are willing to just talk and some do things differently. And I'm wondering how you handled that. Are there ways to optimize the handling of comments, like with a designated facilitator, or what do you do to make that a really valuable venue for those people who have questions and don't want to use the comments?
So I have questions but don't want to use the comment, or how to make sure that the comments getting
how do we make sure that the comment option becomes a really viable way for people to participate and bring forward questions that otherwise won't get brought forward because some people don't like to speak up?
Yeah. So I've seen it done. I think one of the roles that I was mentioning that I've been kind of discovering as we've been going is somebody who does monitor the chat and is keeping track of those questions and is bringing them out and then bringing them to the speaker's attention. You know, I've seen it kind of as formal as like moving those questions to a Google Doc that, you know, then they all get answered, and, you know, forcing people to use the chat. And I guess I have two feelings. I think when they're completely moderated, I really miss hearing multiple voices. So I'm wondering if there's a way to balance between, you know, people that don't want to talk, and just put their question in the chat and having those being read and answered, versus also trying to find ways that incorporate many voices in the conversation too. Because I find when it's just the presenter and the facilitator that's asking all the questions, that it's easy to check out.
And I'd like to make one little comment here. If you keep the breakout groups small, you're more likely to make it more comfortable for people that wouldn't normally speak up to speak up, right? And so in the facilitation of this, the directions were very specific. You've got, 12 minutes. You need to share the space, play well together, be mindful of the amount of time you're talking so that you can give others a chance to talk. And then, a lot of times it would be talk amongst yourselves for 8 minutes. And then at this point, you should be writing in the documents, right? So the instructions were more specific so that they knew how to behave with each other and how much time they had to speak and share the space. Does that answer a little bit more, Charles?
Yeah, when you say talk among each other, do you mean like in the context of a Zoom call where everybody would just perk up?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, exactly.
Great, thank you so much.
So I see a question. There's one question in the chat about training. Charlie, do you think we should move to a little Q&A? Is there anything else you wanted to cover? So the question was about the training that we did ahead of time and the effort that went into that. And so I'm happy to share those resources in addition to touching on it, but we ran two different kinds of session leader training. We ran a technical training that we did many times. I want to say that I did it 4 days a week for 2 weeks. I might have run it 8 times, trying to catch as many of our session leaders as possible. And then we ran with Charlie and Fisher a session convener workshop where we were really kind of encouraging them to think creatively about the interactive portions of their sessions. And then all of that was recorded. So I also shared those things asynchronously with people who didn't show up. So I don't know how many people watched the recording who didn't come. But we probably had 60 to 70% of our session leaders show up to one or both of these trainings. People really started to soak up this training. And it's one of the things that the team is a little bit nervous about going into the winter meeting. You know, are we going to need to do so much training, or do we have a base of session leaders who are trained already, who are going to be able to just hit the ground running in January? And then in addition to that, we ran a daily drop-in training for giving people sort of the walkthrough of KikoChat and how to use KikoChat and how to navigate around this space so that they didn't feel lost. And there was still some feeling lost. What am I missing on the training? We tried to move some calls to KikoChat. So, you know, we have collaboration area calls. So our meetings committee started using KikoChat ahead of the meeting. Our board and program committee both started using KikoChat. So that was a way that we were trying to avoid the wave of all of these people who had never seen this technology all coming to it at once. And so it did seem like, because we had trained our leaders and then our session conveners, and then, you know, we were able to hit a lot of attendees that over time they were, it wasn't too overwhelming in any one session for me. Does that help? Does that answer, Stephanie?
Yes. Erin, I have a question for you. I know, like, Anthony is in the middle of this right now, but like on evaluation, I can't imagine that that was easy to determine what do you evaluate, how do you do it? And I guess my question is around, are there things that you wished you'd evaluated that you didn't? And what would you change about the evaluation process?
Yeah, so actually, in preparing for this session with you all, it did occur to me, one of the things I really wished that we had done, so we've used the same evaluation form more or less for the last several years for our 2 meetings, and then this meeting had a formal evaluator that we completely changed up the questions, which stinks in hindsight, because we could have had this really nice comparison between what people had been saying over the last, 5 or 6 years of in-person meetings with our remote meeting. So I was really wishing that I had some true comparison between this, consistency of survey questions. And then the other things that I wished I had asked more about, or we had paid more attention to, is around these connection points, because that was so important to me. I wished that we had asked people about, did you engage with your small group, your small email group? Did you engage on Slack? Did you, how, like, trying to get them to estimate number of new people that they met. I mean, we did ask them about connections, and they said they thought on average they made 3 to 5 connections at this meeting, which I think is a success. I mean, I feel like that 3 to 5 is better than none. But yeah, more focus on the connection parts of the meeting would have been good.
Maybe we have time for one more question.
Sure. Maybe we've exhausted everybody.
I have a question that maybe is less related to the virtual space, but I'm wondering what happens with all of these notes that were coming from these various different sessions. I know we've probably all attended a lot of meetings where we generate these things, and it often feels like there's not necessarily the infrastructure or the I don't know, all the things that you would need to actually then take that to the next step and feed it back into the community. I'm just curious how you guys handle that.
So Megan Carter from our team is really amazing at coming back after the meeting and updating these sketch pages. And so that's where we get the recording, and the session notes are all here. And then if we have an agreement with Figshare as our institutional repository. So if things are shared through Figshare, then we also have links to those presentations. But that's where, this is where we're coming back to those notes. And then we do see a lot of, like, this is a good example, this public-private partnership session then spun up a ESIP collaboration area called a cluster. And so then that group is now meeting monthly and building on this work. So they're coming back to these kind of notes. But this, these sketch pages act as our proceedings in a very light way. You know, we're not going back to clean up the notes, but the notes are all accessible there. And I think that was, I mean, just on the Google Docs side of things, so each of the groups, we gave them a much more structured session or Google Doc page. And so, you know, we were trying to get them to, you know, make sure that they had attendance and had people adding interest and that kind of thing. And the agenda was just much more kind of fleshed out and descriptive. So that was, I think, an interesting thing that we were able to add because we were virtual. And we then owned all of these docs too. So there was kind of a consistency across session leads. A lot of times in our meetings, it had been like somebody just throws up a Google Doc and then it's lost. So we did have all of these Google Docs were together in a single place that we were able to keep track of, which was nice.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds great.
Cool.
I think we're right up against time here. Erin, I wanted to, so I think you've been recording the session. So I know there was a question earlier. I think somebody had to duck out, and I know we had a number of people ask if it was going to be recorded because they weren't able to attend today. So we'll try and make sure that